In Wilbrooke, the baby cried on schedule. Marjorie knew the intervals without looking at the clock. Early evening fussing, late night hunger, a brief sound just before dawn that meant she should already be awake. The nursery followed those rules as carefully as she did. She lifted her son from the crib when he made the sound meant for that hour. His face was flushed, his hands opened and closed, uncertain, practicing. She was rocking him when he spoke. It was not loud. It did not strain his throat. The voice came out level and practiced, shaped by a man who had finished learning how to use it. "That's fine," it said. "You can put me down." Marjorie did not stop rocking. The chair continued its gentle arc. The baby's mouth moved only slightly, barely enough to justify the sound. She waited for panic. It did not arrive. The house in Wilbrooke remained settled. The hallway light stayed dim. The walls did not lean in. She laid him back in the crib as instructed. The voice did not repeat itself. The baby resumed breathing the way infants are supposed to. In the morning, the pediatric booklet on her counter had been turned to the sleep training page. A corner was folded down. The baby cried at the correct time that night. He did not speak again. In Wilbrooke, houses settled themselves. Arthur learned this after moving in, when doors aligned overnight and floorboards stopped complaining once they were walked on enough. The attic was part of that understanding, unfinished, unused, and never entered unless something needed to be put away. The sound came from above him just after dusk, not footsteps, weight, a careful redistribution, as if someone had stood up and decided to remain that way. Arthur waited. The ceiling did not bow. The light fixture did not sway. The house behaved as if this were within tolerance. He pulled down the attic ladder because it was already halfway open. The rungs met his hands at the correct height. The smell of insulation and dry wood was ordinary. At the top, the attic light was on. Something stood near the center beam, tall enough to require the slope of the roof. It did not turn. It did not breathe. It occupied the space with the confidence of furniture that had always belonged there. Arthur did not speak. He stepped back down. The ladder rose smoothly behind him, latching without help. Later, he found the ladder hook replaced with a newer one, stronger, rated for more weight. That night, the attic light turned off on its own. The house in Wilbrooke felt complete again. The radio had been playing softly all evening, the kind of music that didn't ask for attention. Mr. Avery liked it that way. It made the house feel occupied. He was halfway through his supper when the music faded. There was a pause, a click. Then the announcer spoke. "Good evening, Thomas." Mr. Avery's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. The voice was warm, professional, the same one that read the weather every night. He waited for laughter or clarification. Neither came. The radio hummed quietly. "Just a reminder," the announcer continued, "that you are doing very well." Mr. Avery turned the dial. Static answered him. He tried another station, more static. When he turned back, the music resumed as if nothing had happened. He laughed once, softly, to prove he could. Later, as he washed the dishes, the radio lowered itself again. "Thomas, please don't touch the dial." His name sounded practiced, approved. Mr. Avery dried his hands and switched the radio off at the wall. The silence felt heavier than sound. He went to bed early and slept with the light on. In the morning, the radio sat unplugged on the counter. It turned itself on at 8 o'clock sharp. "Thank you for listening," the announcer said. The radio called my name. Mrs. Grant noticed it while bringing in her groceries. Mr. Holloway stood across the street, as he often did in the late afternoon, adjusting his mailbox, though the mail had already come. He looked up when she waved. That was when she saw his eyes. They were open a little too wide, not startled, not curious, just prepared. The whites showed all the way around as if he were making room for something behind them. Mrs. Grant lowered her hand. "Afternoon," Mr. Holloway said pleasantly. His voice was unchanged, friendly, familiar. She murmured something back and went inside. From the kitchen window, she watched him continue his task, movements neat and practiced. He never blinked. At dinner, she tried to explain it to her husband, but the words felt silly once spoken. People looked tired sometimes. People looked strange. Later that evening, the community newsletter arrived through the slot. Near the bottom, beneath a note about watering schedules, was a new reminder. If a neighbor appears unfamiliar, maintain polite distance. Mrs. Grant folded the paper carefully. Across the street, Mr. Halloway's porch light flicked on. Through the window, she could still see his eyes. They were finally blinking, but not together. The instruction appeared in the weekly circular, printed between a recipe for tuna casserole and a reminder about curbside bins. If your curtains move without wind, hide. Mrs. Leland noticed it just after dusk, while folding laundry in the living room. The windows were closed. The evening was still. She told herself the fabric must have shifted when the heat came on. Then the curtains moved again. Not a flutter, not a sway. A careful pull, as though something had brushed past them on purpose. Mrs. Leland's hands went very still. The room felt suddenly observed, like a classroom after the teacher leaves. She remembered the instruction. Hide. She stepped quietly into the hallway closet and closed the door behind her. Coats pressed against her shoulders. The smell of wool and mothballs filled her nose. She counted her breaths the way the pamphlet suggested. From the living room came the faint sound of fabric sliding along the curtain rod. Then a pause. Then the soft, satisfied click of a window latch being tested. Mrs. Leland did not move. In the morning, the curtains hung perfectly straight. Sunlight poured in as usual. On the kitchen table lay a new circular neatly folded. This time, the instruction had been underlined. It happened just after the house settled for the night, when the pipes had finished knocking and the refrigerator had found its rhythm. Ellen. The voice rose from the basement stairs, calm and familiar. Mrs. Porter paused at the sink, one hand still submerged in warm dishwater. It sounded like her husband. That was the troubling part. Her husband was asleep upstairs, breathing evenly. She dried her hands slowly and listened. Ellen, could you come down here? The notice from the community binder came back to her then, the page she'd skimmed and hoped never to need. If something calls your name from below, do not answer. Mrs. Porter did not reply. She stood very still, staring at the dark square of the basement door. The voice tried again, softer now, as if embarrassed to be asking. Just for a moment. She turned off the kitchen light and went upstairs instead. She did not look back. In the morning, the basement door stood open. The light was on. Nothing appeared disturbed. On the kitchen counter sat a new slip of paper, neatly placed. Thank you for staying where you belong. The notice was taped beside the coat hooks, neatly aligned, as though it had always been there. If you hear breathing in the hall, stay still. Mrs. Calder read it twice while buttoning her raincoat. The house held its usual morning sounds, the radiator ticking, the refrigerator's low, reliable hum. Nothing felt wrong. Still, she paused and listened. That was when she heard it. Breathing, measured, unhurried, not coming closer, not retreating. As if someone stood in the hallway, considering her. Mrs. Calder stopped moving. The carpet pressed cool against her bare feet. Her arm trembled, but she kept it raised. Fingers curled around her last button. The breathing continued steady and precise, as though matching her own. Time softened. Her thoughts thinned. She wondered briefly whether she was doing it correctly. Then the breathing stopped. She waited longer than necessary before moving again. The house felt relieved, almost grateful. Later, as she left for the day, she noticed something new beside the coat hooks. The notice was back. Beneath the original instruction, another line had been added in smaller type. Good. You remembered.